Nobody can heal like you can. O most holy one, you are the great I am. Awesome in all your ways, and mighty is your plan. You are he who carries out redemption plan. You are he who carries out redemption plan. I searched all over, couldn't find nobody. Looked high and low, still couldn't find nobody. Nobody great, nobody great, nobody greater than you. Nobody great, nobody great, nobody greater than you. That's the reason why Jesus said, put no trust in man. He wasn't saying you couldn't trust men. He was just simply saying, don't trust nobody before me, because there ain't nobody greater than me. Nobody greater than me. Men will cause you to fear and be discouraged. He says, but I won't. I'll give you strength out of Zion. I'll give you strength out of me. So whatever it is that you have to do, I'll be me in you, causing you to do what you could not normally do, because I am who I am. I am the great I am. Today's message, I think it's befitting, because we're inside this series what we call He's Going Somewhere With This. But if he is going somewhere with this, he's taking me somewhere. And if he is taking me somewhere, then I have to be prepared for the journey. The funny thing is that if I have to be prepared for the journey, that means I have to be fit for where he's taking me, because where he's taking me, there is a promise there. There is a promise, and I have to be prepared for the promise. If I'm not prepared for the promise, then I'm no good when I get there. I'm no good. I'm just all over the place, and there is no continuity to where I am and what God is doing inside me. And so God is looking at us today, and he's saying to us, I need you to get yourself together. But when I look at me, I feel like Paul, when he says the good that I would do, I do not, because he sees and looks at himself and he says, I see in me two of me. It's two of us. It's two of me. There's one that's hungry for God, that hungers and thirsts after God. And then there's this other one that's comfortable. Just comfortable, just good where he is, And see, good may not be the enemy. Good may not be the opposite of great, but it's certainly the enemy of great. See, because if I'm good, then I'll just be satisfied, and I'll be like, so be at ease, and I won't press towards the mark. What I will do is just be comfortable in my spot. But if God is calling us to have a future and a hope, that means he has something new for me. And something new for me does not come from comfort. If I'm just comfortable where I am, then I'll just always be where I am. But because God has called me to a future and a hope, I wouldn't hope for what I already have. I hope for what I do not have. And so what God is doing now, he said, I have something more than what you have. And so what I need for you to do is be someone else than who you are. But I have the issue with the two of me, the two of me, the comfortable one and the hungry one. And much of it has to do with attention. Much of it has to do with attention. Now, Paul is writing, and it sounds so jumbly because he's so conflicted within himself, because he is warring with the two parts of him, like Jacob and Esau inside of Rebecca. And when Rebecca notices something going on in the inside of her, she's like, what's up with me? And she prays and says, God, I don't understand how I'm feeling. He says there are two natures on the inside of you. They're two natures, and they're at war with one another. And Paul later on wrote about it. He said, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. Jacob hungered after God, and Esau was carnal and could care less about the things of God. And so these natures have the habit of dwelling in us, and God is calling us, and he's saying to us, you have got to get you out of you. And so for a thought today, I have got to get me out of me. See, the two me's are at war with one another all the time, the hungry one and the comfortable one. See, the comfortable one will cause us to be complacent and procrastinate. And so if God is taking me somewhere, the last thing I need to do is to procrastinate and be complacent. Because if I am complacent, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying where I am. I'm not improving. I'm just being who I've always been. And so since God is calling me somewhere and he's calling me out of complacency, and then the next thing I have to understand is that I have got to break habits. See, because it's been my habits that have kept me there. It's not just my nature on its own. It's the habits that these natures have performed on the inside of me. So because I've been doing the same thing every day for so long that my routine is locked in me. And now God is saying, I need for you to break your routine. I've got to break your routine. And so when God starts to call Abram, out of Iraq into Israel, he wasn't saying, I'm just going to take you out of your family's place. He says, no, I'm taking you out of you. See, the problem with us most of the time is not the enemy, not the devil. The problem with us most of the time, at least for me, I'll speak for me. The problem for me is the inner me. It's not, we blame so many things on the devil. Mr. Sewell told me a story some time ago. He said a preacher was preaching in the pulpit and he looks outside the window and he sees a man sitting on a stump outside crying. He sends the deacon, he says, go outside and see what's wrong with that man. And so while he's preaching, the deacon comes back in and he comes and whispers in his ear. He says, it's the devil. He says, huh? He says, it's the devil. He says, what's wrong with him? He's in there crying. He's saying, they're lying on me. See, we blame so many things on the devil that we won't take responsibility for the things that we do ourselves. And so now God is calling me. I'm going to speak for myself. God is calling me to responsibility. He's saying, look, you have to respond to the ability that I placed in you. There's certainly so many things that I placed in you that allow you to be able to do the things I've called you to do, but you have been so complacent. You have these habits that you do. You have these things that you do, and part of them are not because you're lazy. You are not lazy. You are a worker. I called you, young man, because you're strong and the word of God abide in you. You're strong enough to do what I've called you to do. You are a worker. The problem is you procrastinate out of fear. See, most of the time we are under this thing that we procrastinate because I'm lazy and I'm slow of thinking. No, that's not the reason why. We procrastinate because what we do is we find a default to not do so that we can say, I could have done it, but I didn't do, so I hadn't failed in front of anybody else. So that now my failure is not because I couldn't do it. It was simply because I didn't do it. But to sin does not always mean I did something against God. Or I didn't do, or I did what he said not to do. To sin also is to do what you were told to do but did not do. If he has given me a direct order to do and I have not done, that is sin. And so now it's an omitted sin. It's not a committed sin. It's an omitted sin. And so now God is looking at us. He says, your procrastination is sin. Your procrastination is deliberate disobedience, that you purposely heard me say to do this and you did not do it. And so when I look at Abraham, we talked about him last week, and I'll just revisit him again just for a point of reference. Now, Abraham, he's called out of Iraq, and he goes into the city of Nahor, relatives of him. And so he's out of where he's from and he's into a new place, but he's still familiar with the place. And God looks at him again. He says, get from around your kindred and your family. Get from out of your country. And he says to him, God, Abraham could have easily said to God, hey, God, I'm not where I'm from. He says, nah, but you're familiar with where you are. Where you are is really familiar with you. And so that's the reason why you haven't left, because you're comfortable there. And you can get complacent there and you will procrastinate and you will not go where I've called you to go. And so he moves into what we know as the promised land. Now he's moving around, going from place to place, and he is a stranger in a place where he knows no one but his family. And then he looks around and he has Lot with him, his nephew. And God looks at him, he says, there's still a problem. You're still dragging around your past. You're still pulling around your past. And the reason why you can't be who you've called to be is because you're pulling your past with you. See, even Albert Einstein said this. He says, you cannot not do a new thing with an old mind. You cannot fix this current problem with the same mindset. See, I can give you a new skill set, but if you have the old mindset, you'll just be doing the same thing over and over again. And so Abram at the time, God was trying to get Abram out of Abram so he can make him Abraham. See, he changes his name from Abram to Abraham. He knew what he was doing. He was like, I have to get you from around everything that you know, because as long as you're around everything you know, you won't know anything else. You will always cling to what you know instead of unlearning some things that are holding you back. There are certain things that we know that they don't do anything for us. They just hold us to where we've always been. They anchor us into a place. And if you're anchored into a place that you can't float, you drown. And so God is saying to us, I got to get you out of you, because there's two of you. And if I carve off the part of you that you don't need, you'll be the one I've called you to be. If you look at an ice sculpture at any time, you'll see that the man takes a chisel and a hammer. He begins to knock things off. He's knocking ice off. And so one day I heard a lady ask the gentleman, he says, how do you do that? He looks at her while he's hammering it. He said, I take off the pieces that you don't need to see what you see. And so what God is doing is that there are certain pieces of us that we do not need. And God says, let me knock that off so you can be who I've called you to be. Even John the Baptist, when he's talking to Jesus, he looks at him, he says, I must decrease that you might increase. And so now God is looking at us saying, he says, I need for you to decrease. I need for you to break these habits. I need for you to cut off pieces of you. Now it's time to circumcise. Put the skin in the game is a whole lot bigger now. Now it's time to circumcise habits and routines and the things that fashioned us. He says, because now I'm calling you to be greater than you've ever been, bigger than you've ever been. But I can't even make you bigger until you become small again. You ever seen a bodybuilder train? You don't train with the fat on you. You trim the fat down, and then you start putting your muscle back on so you look like something. He says, but if you're carrying it, you're just bigger and bloated. God is saying, look, trim that stuff off. That's holding you down. That's holding you out. That's making you procrastinate. That's making you be complacent. See, the problem of complacency for us is we begin to be too impressed with ourselves. I'm good with where I am. I'm content with where I am. And the problem with contentment is that it locks me down to that one particular place. And so I'm stagnant then. And stagnant is no place for growth. There's no room for improvement when I'm too impressed with myself. When I'm so impressed with myself that no one can tell me anything. I can't be taught anything because I know everything. You can't tell me anything. I already know. And now that I know, you can't tell me because I already know. And God's looking at us and he says, look, you're too impressed with yourself. He says, what I want you to do now is I want you to humble yourself. Humble, because the beginning of any upward mobility is humility. The beginning of any upward mobility is humility. And so God's looking at us. He says, now I'll tell you what, if you can do this now, if you can pay attention to me and less of you. See, because attention is the currency that purchases our destiny. Attention is the currency by which we purchase our destiny. What we pay attention to determines where we're going to. And so God is looking at us. He says, look, I need for you to pay less attention to yourself and pay more attention to me. Now, pay attention to me. As a matter of fact, let's try this, right? Let's try this thing that's called fasting thing, where you deny your flesh, because what you need to do now is you have got to kill off the part of you that's hurting you, so that you can feed the part of you that makes the real you, Because I'm telling you right now, if I abide in you and you abide in me, we can have that you can ask whatever you will. Why? Because it's the part of you that gets things out of me. That part of you that's trimmed down, that lays aside every weight and sin that so easily besets me. That part of me makes things happen in your life. Because when you do that, now I can't withhold anything from you. I cannot withhold anything from them that walk upright before me. Those people that are willing to deny themselves, that are not so impressed with themselves, that pay attention to me, I can't withhold anything from them. The woman with the issue of blood, it wasn't just that she had it on her mind. It wasn't just that she had faith. It's because she understood positioning. That she had positioned her mind to pay attention to him and him only. That she did not pay attention to the crowd. She did not pay attention to what the people were saying. She did not pay attention to what was going on around her. She had paid attention to Jesus. And she said, if I can but just. And she pressed towards the mark. See, sin actually means to miss the mark. And often we miss the mark, procrastinate. We miss the mark in complacency. We miss the mark being so impressed with myself. I think I'm the stuff. I smell so good. I got the breast. I got the fresh Dolce Gabbana, and I got my hair products. I'm trimmed. And God says, I'm not impressed with none of that stuff. That's fleshly. That's carnal. Paul, when he was writing about it, he says, I'm carnal. But then he begins to write inside Philippians. He says, I have not count myself to attain. I ain't there yet. I'm getting me out of me. I've got to get me out of me because there's something that God wants to do in my life, and he can't do it until I get me out of me. See, because me has been in the way. You know, sometimes I can be in my own way. I can just be in my own way, doing my own thing. And God says, you can't do your own thing. You're not your own. You've been bought with a price. And now that you've been bought with a price, you belong to me. It cost you something. Now it cost me something. Now it's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you your life. Now that your life belongs to me, you listen to me. You pay attention to me. You do what I say. And you do it when I say it. You don't do it when you feel like doing it. No, you don't just when you feel like doing what I say you do it. You don't get complacent and you do not procrastinate, because if I told you to do it, that means I want you to do it when I said to do it, not when you feel like doing it. Not when you feel like getting up. See, now I want you to get out of you. So then you need to get out of your feelings. See, because we can't serve God with our feelings. We have to serve God with our faith. The woman with the issue wasn't chasing him for her feelings. She was reaching him with her faith. And so he said, pay attention to me. Get out yourself. I got to get me out of me, because if I don't get me out of me, I will never be the me I'm supposed to be. And so what's the use of him having a future for me if I ain't ready for it? He can't even put me there because I'm not there. He can hardly put me where he's called me, because if he put me where he's called me, I'm out of place. That I don't fit there. Why? Because I didn't do the things that he's called me to do. But if I do press towards the mark. And Abraham, when he is offered of Isaac, the testing was to see where Abraham's heart was. You know why? Because God was saying, let me see how much of Abraham is Abraham. Or let me see how much of Abraham is me. See, because me and Abraham have had a relationship so long that now he and I have an understanding. And let me see where Abraham is now. Let me see where Abraham is. Abraham lays his boy, his promised child, down on the altar. And he lays him down. And he pulls back the knife. And God says, okay, I see. Then God puts the ram in the thicket. And there, right where he was about to kill his son, God provides. And when Abraham has finished killing the sacrifice and offering the sacrifice unto God, he names the place. Abraham names the place where he is spiritually. So where he names that place is where he is spiritually. He names the place, the Lord will provide in the mountain of the Lord. Or as if to say, the Lord will provide inside God. God will provide inside of God. So that if I can cut all of me, that is on me, that is hindering me from being the God that God has called me to be, that when I will do that, God will provide inside of God. That I will never have to worry about anything or any place I am, whatever I'm going to be, because God, what I don't have, God has. And he will provide inside of God. God is saying to us, look, stop dragging all of that stuff that you need to let go. Let that go. That's hindering you from the things that I want to put in you, that I want to replace in you. See, if you let that go, I will replace it, but I will replace it with greater. That I will replace your good with great. When Rachel was leaving her father's house, she stole his idols. When Laban, her father, came to say, where's my stuff? He was like, it's one thing, Jacob, that you took my girls. He says, but the other thing is that you took my stuff. And Laban thought that Jacob had taken his stuff. It wasn't Jacob. It was his wife. And so when Laban approaches Rachel and says, do you have my stuff? And she's like, nah, I don't have your stuff. What makes you think I have your stuff? All the while she's sitting on it. And she says, well, and he's like, get up so I can see if you're sitting on it. He said, nah. She says, matter of fact, I'm in the woman's way right now. It's that time of the month. And so you don't want to touch this. And so he's like, okay, forget it. The problem with it is that Rachel was dragging to the new place stuff that needed to stay there. She was dragging her father's demons with her. Sometimes we have the habit of dragging generational curses with us deliberately because we don't know how to let things go. And we don't know how to let go of those things that hinder us, that won't let us be who God has called us to be. We drag it right to the next place we're going. If you take me to a new place and I haven't changed, I'll just be that same person in a new place. And God is looking at us. He says, I want to take you to your future and your hope. But you can't be who you've been in that place because you'll just be you there. He says, but what I've called you to be is to have something different. That your future, you will be someone different. That you are a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are made new. And that is for you in this new place. And I don't want you to drag your father's demons with you. Your father's demons have kept him where he is all of his life. That your father, if he does not let them go, he will die with those demons. Don't you die with your father's demons. Let them go. Let go procrastination. Let go complacency. Let go contentment and press. Keep this mindset to press towards the mark for the prize. It's yours. The prize already is yours. Press towards the mark. Don't stop. Do not stop. No excuses. No exceptions, no questions.